Hey everyone, it's the Loudwire podcast. My name is Graham.
My name is Joe.
Joseph.
Yes, sir.
And today, we've got a punk legend in the studio from one of my favorite hardcore bands, from one of your favorite hardcore bands, the Bad Brains. The Bad Brains.
Did you know it's not the bad in Bad Brains is not meant to be like bad and nefarious. It's meant to be like, man, that's bad.
And HR's here because he's got a new book, Finding Joseph I. Also, we have one of the co-authors of the book, Howie Abrams, in the studio. Great guest, lots of insight. It's hard to kind of jump around this thing, but, HR is just not in the best shape. It's hard to pussyfoot. What a stupid term. It's hard to dance around that fact, that the guy is obviously struggling with his physical and mental health. He's got some really bad issues with headaches. He's actually about to go in for brain surgery. He told us in this podcast, something that we had no idea. He was good.
Maintaining a positive outlook through all of it.
Oh my God, yeah. That's one thing is, he's very quiet, somewhat subdued. But
he seems content though.
Yeah, I guess.
Like with all the stuff that's happened in the past, because anytime that we bring up anything negative from his past, as you'll see, and then even outside of this podcast, he was always talking about growth as a person and really just kind of spiritual growth and bettering yourself for, to make everything else around you pleasant. It's a radiant experience.
With him, it always comes back to positivity, which is, a great way to live your life if you're able to, kind of place yourself into that headspace as much as possible. It's obviously very difficult when someone like HR is going through physical and mental issues that, would cripple most of us. But yet he was kind enough to come sit down here and talk a bit about his life, a bit about the stuff that he's going through, about the book. And also Howie, a great guest. Really,
Absolutely.
you'll hear him. You can really tell that he understands HR as a person. HR kind of came to us. Whenever people come to us, unless we have prior relationships with them, they're strangers. We know their art, we know their music, but they're strangers. So he is a fantastic addition to this podcast because he really knew how to get HR moving on a subject, and he knew what kind of stuff HR would like to address, and he could really engage HR in a way that only someone very close to him would know how to do. So we're so happy that we got him on here to help us out.
Yeah, he was able to find a lot of agreeable talking points, and then from there that kind of led HR in the right direction, and then he was able to communicate everything he wanted to with us.
For sure. So a really interesting podcast coming your way with the one and only HR, human rights of the Bad Brains. It's the Loudwire podcast. Get ready to sit down
And shout!
All right, Loudwire podcast here. We are with two men, one of which goes by many names. Hunting Rod, Human Rights, Mr. PhD, some call him Mr. Exaggeration, some call him Joseph, some call him Paul. We all call him HR of the Bad Brains. And the new book is Finding Joseph I, an oral history of HR from the Bad Brains. One of the co-authors is here as well, Howie Abrams. Thank you both so much for coming. We appreciate it.
Thanks. I'm sorry I only have one name.
Well, the other ones aren't included in this book.
Yeah.
But what I did love about this book was, normally when you see a rock biography or memoir or autobiography that's, about 270 pages, sometimes you kind of expect that, they just kind of half-assed it. I've read so many of these things, and normally when they're this thin, it's like, oh, geez, they really just kind of talked a little bit about this.
They didn't have enough.
They just didn't have enough, or they just didn't try. But I was very, very pleasantly surprised by this because not only does it delve into a lot of stuff that I just didn't know, and a lot of really interesting stuff, and a lot of, the juicy details and the beginnings of the Bad Brains and a lot of your childhood HR. It is completely filled with different perspectives from, HR, your contemporaries, the people who grew up listening to the Bad Brains, your friends, your family. I mean, it really is a really short and dense book that you can enjoy, in a night.
Yeah, I'm glad that you dug it and you got it that way. It's listen, there's a lot to talk about when it comes to this man, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And James Lathos, who is also the director of the documentary on HR.
Yeah, The Companion.
We did the book together, and as fans, I think we tried to put together a book that we would want to read about HR. I go way back as a Bad Brains fan, since a little longer than James, because I'm a little older than him, but I'm not going to give it away. But I wanted to hear about all the things that you couldn't access, about
Sure.
the band and this group and this guy who, you knew stuff about, but there was a lot you didn't know. And if we could bring out some of the things that people really wanted to know about, that was the goal.
That's great. And here's a question for both of you. Were either of you taken back or flattered by any of the contributions from, again, the contemporaries, the fans?
Is there anybody in the book that you were like really happy they jumped in?
Yes, sir.
Who was it?
Ross Michaels. He developed a style of his own, Nyabingi music, out of Kingston, Jamaica.
He was a big part of your life for a while, wasn't he?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. I mean, how about you? Who did you enjoy interviewing the most? Whose perspective really floored you?
I mean, I think there's a couple of people's perspective that I really appreciate in the book. So it was interesting to read Ian Mackay's take.
Oh, sure.
And what's cool is that he does say, like, look, I didn't really know him that well after, say, 1983. So I'm not going to try to tell you a whole bunch about,
Right.
HR, after that, because I don't really know. And what was nice is that after he got to read the book, he was able to say, I learned a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't know about HR because I was doing other things, and Minor Threat was breaking up, and then we did Fugazi, and I'm doing a record label, and I lost touch with a lot of things. But I think the longtime manager of the Bad Brains is Anthony County, and he was with you so much, like, throughout your career. And so he sort of experienced every twist and turn of HR's career, a lot of things just about his life, but certainly Bad Brains. And so it was interesting because he doesn't know an awful lot about your solo work. He knows you did it, but he doesn't really know what was going on with you when you made this solo record, or Charge, or It's About Love. Like, he really wasn't a part of that, but he was so interesting. It was very interesting hearing what he had to say when it came to just all of these different chapters in the Bad Brains career. And this is like spanning decades.
Yeah.
So I thought he was great.
Yeah, to have someone like him and everyone else to come in and kind of weave that narrative of every part of HR's life. Everyone who writes a book will have that stuff for their personal use and then kind of write it in first person or third person or whatever. But then putting it in a group of little memoirs together gives it a really interesting feel.
I think it's also cool because it proves the influence of the Bad Brains getting all those contributions. You always hear about all these bands and, they were so influential, and a lot of the books don't really dive into exactly how they were influential, how they shaped other people's music, because you don't have them to give that perspective. So it's a lot of people just, telling you their influence back to you.
I don't even think you can touch upon all of it either, because
Sure.
there's stuff that, that we couldn't even get to probably in the book as far as what you're talking about, because, you have Duff McKagan, right, from Guns N' Roses. He's like, oh, I saw them on their first ever tour. I went to see one of the other bands, and
he's
I'd
a
only
huge punk
only
fan.
just heard of the Bad Brains, so I was curious. But then, you have the Beastie Boys when they were accepting,
Of course.
being inaugurated into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, thanking the Bad Brains, like from the podium. And it's just, they felt sort of obligated almost to make sure that people knew how much that band influenced what they did. And, and people recognized them largely because of hip hop. And, they were a punk rock group, playing shows with these guys,
Yeah, they opened
many
for the Bad
decades,
Brains.
right?
Yeah,
many decades earlier.
Yeah, and talking about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Bad Brains were nominated for this year's class. Didn't get in, unfortunately. But HR, is that something that surprised you?
Yes, sir.
Yes, it did. Did you ever think that a band like the Bad Brains, I mean, really like the first hardcore punk band to ever be nominated, did you ever think that something like that was even possible?
Especially given that
At
Deep
the
Purple
time,
just got in a year ago.
At that time, it was relayed to me by the manager, and that was serious to me, and I was glad that they did it. But I didn't have any idea. No, I wasn't expecting that to happen.
Yeah.
When you were younger and you started doing music, I think like every kid who picks up a guitar, right? They're like, maybe one day I'll be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame,
I guess so, yeah.
Did you have any, like when you started playing music when you were younger, have any kind of dream like that? Was important to you?
Yes, sir. I would say it was important to me because they got a suit of mine. Timothy came to us.
That's
and
right.
she wanted to put it in the Smithsonian Institute.
There's
Really?
a
At the Smithsonian?
there's a photo of the Bad Brains in the Smithsonian in the new
Wow.
African American History Museum, the new Smithsonian
Makes
that
sense.
opened less than a year ago, I think.
Yes.
So when we did the screening of the Finding Joseph I film in D.C., I went there the next morning because I had to see the Bad Brains photo in the Smithsonian.
Yeah.
And it's mind blowing, like to even have that kind of acknowledgement. So I think it's interesting that like that level of, I don't know what you want to call it. The level of acknowledgement that it's gotten to is not something I think I would have ever expected to see. So you have to be, like, how'd that happen?
It is pretty nuts. Even Slayer is in the Smithsonian,
Right.
which is pretty interesting.
You gotta take a trip there, I think.
Yeah.
And one thing that I really wanted to talk about is the PMA, positive mental attitude. And this was coming around at a time where, with the rise of punk music, it was angry, it was rebellious. There was a message it was very anti-message. And then, Bad Brains come along and it's just, we're all here together. Let's do the right thing. Let's have a good time. What was it like for you trying to come up in that same punk scene? Obviously, you heard all this punk music that blew you away and you put down the Black Sabbath a little bit. But to take this message and have it contrast all of that music that was influencing you and overwhelming you.
I think it was my wife. She had told me about food politics and also Chinese medicine and how it interconnected with what I was going through physically. And she taught me a whole lot, and she took me to the hospital so that I would learn about what was going on in my head because I was experiencing bad headaches at the time. And Dr. Lee came to me and he said, well, we're going to have a surgery, brain surgery.
Oh, jeez.
And so then they'll know about it.
Yeah. When did this happen?
This happened about 2 years ago.
Okay.
And the surgery is coming up, right, in February?
Yes, sir. February 21st.
Oh, wow, you're actually having brain surgery?
Yes, sir.
Oh no! Wow. I mean, is that a frightening thing to know that's
No,
on
sir.
the horizon?
No.
Wow, I couldn't imagine. But what kind of procedure are they going to be doing?
You'd have to talk to Dr. Lee about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So HR has headaches. It's like
Right.
a very
Very serious.
sort of advanced type of headache that comes on kind of out of nowhere, and it's very debilitating. So,
Right.
he finally found a doctor that considered him eligible for a procedure that could be very helpful for it.
So is it experimental still?
No, I don't think so. He said he's done it many, many times.
Oh,
right?
Yes,
okay.
he's done it over 200 times.
And it works?
Yes, sir.
a
And
great
he has
deal of the time?
seen an improvement.
Oh, great.
Can you apply like the concept of PMA to a situation like that where you're going to face something huge, and that's something that you can apply, even to a surgery?
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. I think so.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, anyone who's going into surgery, you need to. I think most doctors will tell you that if you go in with a positive attitude, you're probably more likely to pull out healthier than
Yeah.
if you're stressed out and negative about what's going on.
Yeah, listen, stress can cause, physical.
Stress will kill you.
Yeah.
Just full on. Stress is probably the most dangerous thing you can.
Well, as you can see, he's a very stressed out individual.
Yeah, HR is very chill, absolutely.
And another thing with PMA too is that going back to that negative message that a lot of punk was portraying, or maybe not negative, but just that anti-mentality is very rough and abrasive. And it seems like there's nothing more dangerous, interpret that word how you will, than someone with a positive attitude and a mission. Because anger tends to cloud judgment, and anybody who's got an angry message never really seems to be able to see it through. But those with the positive message usually come out on the other side and meet their goal. So what was it like for you now with this surgery coming up, and what is there anything that you're doing to kind of prepare yourself in this state?
Yes, sir. There is something I've been doing. I've been dealing with spirulina and wheatgrass, and also golden seal, and then vitamin A and vitamin D, vitamin C. And I did experience some improvement out of these medicines, but they were holistic medicines.
Sure.
So one has to go through it and be able to understand what the doctor is talking about and listen to him carefully, because modern day medicine was spread to Ethiopia through Haile Selassie, and he said there needs to be modern medicine in Ethiopia, and he did put that into position and worked at it.
Great.
Do you see anyone in a position of power these days preaching positivity?
Yes, sir. I think I'd have seen people expressing their inner feelings so that preachers and teachers of houses, and using the idea of calling it flip, where they would flip over a house and sign it to new people, and they were growing from that image, and it took them out of poverty into prosperity.
Okay, so that's a positive thing in your mind.
Yes, sir, it is.
Great. Do you see any politicians that are preaching positivity today?
Oh, yes.
Yes?
Oh, yes.
Like who?
Well, there was one. He just left office, and his name is Mr. Obama.
Yes. I
Exactly.
think I would happen to agree with you on that. A lot of positivity was preached by that man.
Sense of unity.
Yeah, for sure. One of the quotes that really stood out to me in this book, when you're talking about different violent episodes in the past, I forget who said it, but somebody said that it was as if HR's decisions were out of his own hands. Can you speak to, did you feel like during those times where you maybe get lost in a violent episode that decision wasn't 100% yours?
That's a tough question.
Yeah.
Could you be specific?
Oh, sure. I mean, in an altercation like, hitting a manager or a skinhead, on, say, the Beasties tour, when you were that overcome with anger, did you feel like something else was taking over you? Something, outside of your own will, almost?
Well, I would say yes, and I had a lot to learn in life.
Yeah.
And it helped me to learn. But being physical doesn't have anything to do with it. One has to first take out the Babylon inside of their heart, and then one can then go through experiences without being negative.
Great. One thing I'd love to talk about is when Republican presidents tend to come into office, you tend to see this rejuvenation of punk rock music because a lot of people tend to be angrier during those times. Of course, in the 80s, Reagan, and you had the hardcore movement kind of spawn out of that. A lot of people really connected with that music because of their anger with the establishment. And then H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, there was a bit of a punk resurgence there too. Do you see punk rock coming back stronger than ever now that Donald Trump is president?
Women, yes.
Women?
Yes, they just had a rally of sisters in Washington.
Absolutely.
And the sisters talked about positive things. There were women, Hillary.
Mm-hmm.
Hillary Clinton was another one of those sisters that knew the politician wouldn't get over. And there were 4 fires in Washington, D.C. the other day.
Mm-hmm.
And people were rioting.
Right.
And they don't want to see Trump in office at all.
Yeah, I mean, rioting is as fucking punk rock as it gets, right? it's I mean, that's the non-musical equivalent in a way. Maybe it's, maybe it's power violence. I don't know. But it's like the infest of, but I mean, as far as music goes, yeah, because what HR just described that went on in DC on Inauguration Day, it's like, I hope people throw some musical tantrums like that too.
I'd rather see people express themselves in that way.
Yeah, I mean,
the anarchists out there, breaking windows.
I think a good example would actually be Pussy Riot.
Pussy Riot's a great example.
Yeah, I mean, just think about what they were doing in Russia a couple of years ago. Like, they didn't know this was going to go viral and they're going to get arrested and there's going to be people all over the world trying to do benefits trying to, raise bail for them and get them out of jail. And, to them, it was a small act. It was like they made a little bit of music and they made this wacky video and they probably assumed they were going to get in trouble for it, the one they made in that church. But basically, I don't think they expected the impact that it had. And, I just think we're living in kind of a very cushy, safe time when it comes to edgy music sometimes.
Yeah.
That people are just kind of a little too comfortable. And, I think for a band to resonate and stick around for a really, really long time, as the Bad Brains have, like that we're sitting here this many years later and there's just an HR book coming out and we're sitting here talking to him about things he's done for decades. It's, you have to take chances. You have to go there. And I just don't know how many bands are really, willing to go there. I want to be wrong about that, but I'm not seeing an awful lot of, musicians, I mean, it's easy to just
very calculated.
Yeah, it's very calculated. It's easy to say something in an interview or put it on your social media or whatever. But there's people that, you you got to like walk the walk a little bit, you know.
It's
and
true.
And I'd love to see more of that, and I hope that the next 4 years brings that about, you know, where people, you know, not only feel like screaming, but scream something that people need to hear.
Yeah.
You know, not just fuck you, but fuck you, why don't we do this instead?
Well, there's a
You know?
great audience on both sides right now, because there's the audience who probably is craving that kind of music to speak to what they're feeling in, you know, their disapproval of what's going on. And then there's also the audience on the other side who are ready to just attack like a lefty punk band or whatever with just like surgical precision, you know, whether it's just online or in person. You know, there's a lot of super angry people out there who will start some stuff like in response to anything that's against their views. So that's
Well, listen, I mean, with what we're talking about, if what we're describing does start to come about in the next bunch of years, listen, Screwdriver records are going to get bigger too. You know what I'm saying? It's
That
like,
would suck.
it's you know, but there's going to be, you know, people who are looking for that to counter what we're talking about,
Yeah.
you know, and that's how it existed in the first place, is that punk, you know, was doing its thing in England, you know, in the 70s, and then people got tired of that, you know, and being like, oh, that became like art school, you know, this, that, and the other thing. And so you had this whole Oi movement, you know, that
Oh, of course,
that was much more of like a street level thing, but it was also, you know, kind of a certain type of politic, right? And it's not exclusively, but it attracted that type of audience, you know, and there was a lot of that going on. And it's, you know, it's generational and it's all that. And then you have, you know, a Resistance Records, you know, down the line, and, you know, who knows what it's going to be now, because like we're hoping that some great bands come out of this, like Being Angry. Well,
sure.
it's going to be fucking white people real angry too, and they're going to do some shitty stuff.
you know, it's a real shame. There's this punk band called Gloss.
Oh, I know them. They broke up.
They broke up, and that's a damn shame right now, because
Yeah.
they were so
They were
good.
the one band putting it out there, I think, over
Exact-
the
they
last
were-
couple of years.
They were the ones, you know, for those who don't know, a transgender punk band who are making incredible music and actually speaking to a lot of different people and, as actual outsiders.
They were like a love them or hate them. Like, you know,
thought they were
nobody in the
amazing.
middle. You love this band or you hated this band.
They absolutely would have been the band to piss off everybody and to make amazing music while
Yep.
doing it. So it's such a shame that.
But
they
you
broke
just
up.
hope, like, you don't have to, like, place all of that weight on one band, right? Like,
Yeah.
God, I hope that this isn't the only thing we have there is to talk about.
But I think Gloss, if they proved one thing, is that there's a space for it.
Oh, yeah.
There's a space for that band to come through, and
That
to-
space should be opening up, too.
Well, it is now that Gloss is gone.
Yeah.
You know, and that again, I heartbroken that they're gone.
They're
because
real.
like,
They were a really good band too, and that was the difference too. Is that there was the message, but like they were a fucking really aggressive, like interesting band.
Yeah.
You felt
know?
something
Yeah,
when you heard
it's
it.
like it
God,
moved you.
yes.
You know, and it wasn't just the message, but the music was subpar, or vice versa. It was actually, you know, like
They were
it was a
great.
package.
yeah.
And if we don't get any music, I'm sure Henry Rollins is just going to do a bunch more talking.
He'll keep talking. Were you friends with Henry back in DC?
Yes.
Because he was around with Ian a lot, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so because I know Ian really does credit the Bad Brains, right? For
Yes, he does,
for even
for-
starting a band.
Well, for even
you know?
influencing
I
the
think
straight
Henry
edge,
would say the same thing.
Yes.
Yeah,
for sure.
and Ian hates what's happened with straight edge.
Does he?
Yeah, he just to him he's just like, man, I just wrote a fucking song, like, and now it's like this thing, and it's all over the world, and I'm responsible, and I hate people who drink, and I hate. He's like, I didn't say any of that.
Yeah,
You
they
know?
did
He
take
just
that a
personally
bit crazy.
abstained.
He's like, I didn't realize I was like, you know, at the podium for straight edge.
Yeah.
Like I didn't. That wasn't it. I was just talking about myself.
Yeah, there's a funny article I saw on that website, The Hard Times.
Oh, the
Yeah,
best.
it was like straight edge friend, a scumbag in every other possible
Right,
way.
right.
Like, I think
Right.
we all know someone like that. But HR, you know, in that vein, when you think of yourself being the person who really put PMA on the map and gave a lot of people that ideology, does that make you happy?
Yes, sir.
It does.
It
so,
does.
you know, I guess the opposite of what Ian Mackay feels about, you know, the little revolution that he spawned.
Yeah, I think he's kind of glad about it, but he's just like, it just took on such a different life.
Yeah.
That I'm like, I didn't expect that. And I'm not all that psyched about it, because if a straight edge kid does this, it's my fault.
Oh, yeah.
You
for
know?
Sure.
He's a point man.
Right. So it's hard to argue with somebody does something positive because they believe in the idea of PMA. You're probably not going to have a downside to that.
Yeah.
you know?
HR, do you see the PMA mindset? Do you see it as basically the same kind of thing as you brought up, back in those early Bad Brains records?
Yes.
You think people
Yes,
are
sir, I do.
interpreting it the same way that you are?
Well, a lot of people have grown since then and went into their own scene. But for the Bad Brains, our mind power, for us, it does hold a formula that we have lived by through the years. And that's good.
Absolutely.
And the term mind power comes from the book as well, right? The Napoleon Hill book. So even the first band before Bad Brains, called Mind Power,
yeah.
comes straight from that book as well.
Totally. Another really interesting part of the book, now that we're speaking about politics, is a little part about Ronald Reagan, about believing that he was the Antichrist. Because Ronald is 6 letters, his middle name 6 letters, and Reagan is 6 letters.
Yeah, I don't know if you buy into that, but was that like the way it was for you? Like, did you have a particular opinion about Ronald Reagan specifically at that time? About him being a negative influence or
Nah,
force?
because I wasn't into politics.
No.
We weren't into political expressions.
Yeah, and
So
mind
it
you,
didn't matter.
that information is not from him.
Right.
So it's from someone else. So a lot of people have a lot of thoughts on HR and the history of Bad Brains. So it's an interesting...
Was that a black Israelite
I don't
position?
know. I don't know. I think I don't know if it's something that... This was Mark Anderson, right, who said that in the book, that he was looking at, the way you may have viewed that period of time, the Reagan years, and Ronald Reagan specifically, and that you made more out of it at the time, that Reagan specifically was this bad guy,
Mark had said that something happened to me, that I've changed a lot. And I think he meant musically we had changed. And for him, that was such a great change from rock and roll to reggae. And then seeing me grow dreadlocks, I think for him, it was just a little too extreme.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he must love the God of Love record then.
Yes, sir.
But I think that's a good point, because I think that's a point in time for you where I think a lot of people don't understand that stuff, because it's a religion, and it's it's a very it's an old religion, and it's very specific, and it's something that people they get into Bob Marley, and then suddenly they smoke some weed and they think they're Rastas. You know what I mean? And so that happened a lot for years and years and years. But you really delved into this. You embraced this religion, and it became such a huge part of your life. And I think that's a very misunderstood part of your life, like what you were just saying, that Mark didn't understand that stuff and thought it was extreme, so he took what he thought you were thinking to an extreme too. And I think that happens a lot, you hear a little story about someone and suddenly you put your own
We
take
try to
on
rationalize
it,
it within our own understanding.
And I think that
of
happens
somebody.
to you a lot. A lot of people put their spin on what they think HR is about, which is why I think it was so important to have all these voices in the book.
Sure.
Because even within a chapter, you can see that different people will say something completely different about the same topic.
It represents life.
Yeah, but that's it. That's how life goes. It's that, but only he knows.
Only HR does, yeah.
And now, speaking about going from punk rock and roll over to reggae, there was a period of conflict where you felt that punk was the devil's music and reggae was God's music. What was it like trying to let go of punk music, having been such a huge part of your past?
It was a difficult change. A lot of people didn't understand why, and they wanted to embrace rock and roll and call it their music. And badness brings sadness. So only John knows. If you have the captain, wear it. And reggae music was a rebel sound for rebels, but it wasn't rebellious to be rebelling against God, but being a rebel in the soul and taking out the negativity and being a rebel onto your negativity and find out the best way you can relate to it.
So you felt that in order for you to grow, the way to help yourself along in that process was to switch more heavily involvement into reggae music?
It depends on the individual, because some people are into Buddha, some people are into Hare Krishna, and some people are into Allah. So it's not for us to judge them. Judge not. We're looking for soldiers now to start job organization, and such a long time that they've been reaching out to Africa, and we just hope we can be that generation that does get a chance to visit Africa and see the site for ourselves.
As someone who believes so much in positivity, when you thought that, when you came to the belief that punk was maybe a negative influence, was it difficult to think that maybe you had brought negative influence?
No, sir, I don't.
Good. I'm glad, because you definitely didn't. There was never a point where you thought, oh, I brought negativity, because of punk rock. Never felt that way.
No, sir, okay. Not at all.
Awesome. Another part of the book that was almost, like a foretelling of what was to come was when you said, HR, that you thought that music should be free, because music is a gift from God. I remember reading that in the book. And of course, now we're in an age where a lot of people don't pay for music. They just download it and get it for free. So what do you think about that change? Do you see it as positive?
One has to remember the free attitude, and sometimes one can be so free that they just receive and move on with their responsibilities in life. So we have to remember being free is not an extreme, and to let freedom be with them but not be apart from them.
So do you think music is a part of that freedom?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I know that for a long time you having money problems and you were homeless and just going from friend's house to friend's house. Was it at all frustrating when the music industry changed and suddenly nobody's making money from selling albums anymore?
Well, they say vinyl's on the rise.
Vinyl's absolutely on the
projected
rise.
to be $1 billion industry.
So we're on the way to find out.
So,
I got my wife a few decent reggae albums and
on vinyl?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of them was the Wailers.
Oh, great.
And another one was John Holt.
Who got who the turntable? Did you buy her the turntable for Christmas?
Yeah,
Nice.
There's an amazing, I'm not going to give out all the information, but there's an amazing Instagram post from his wife where he had just given her the turntable, and you put the Wailers record on and they're dancing in the house.
Oh.
And it's so great. And she's so happy to have gotten this thing, and you look as happy as she does.
Yeah.
And she got the gift. But that's amazing. And so he's walking it because it's, I saw this incredible moment happen, and it actually relates to vinyl.
For sure.
And so you went and got her these records, right? It's amazing.
Yeah, there's magic in vinyl. Those old analog recordings are something a little magical in there.
It's nothing better.
No, not at all. Thank you both for sitting down with us. We so appreciate your time. HR, Howie Abrams, get the new book, Finding Joseph I. It's available now. All the stories that you need to know about the bad brains, about HR. Pick it up now. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, there he is, HR from the Bad Brains, and Howie Abrams, co-author of the new book. You can get it now. So as you could hear, HR, a quiet man, a man of few words at times.
Says a lot with a little.
Yeah, he does.
One thing that anybody listening to this podcast won't be able to tell is when we mentioned the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Bad Brains getting the nomination, his face was illuminated. And
it wasn't it?
He didn't
Yeah.
even need a word to communicate what he was feeling just getting that nomination. I mean, you look at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the amount of acts that have not been inducted that are shoo-ins is absurd. Yeah. And then you get a band like Bad Brains, and I remember when they announced all the nominations, I was just like, no way. They can't acknowledge all these basic acts, and then they dig deep and they find something so unique and specific like the Bad Brains. And if anything, even if they never get in, getting them in the nomination at least puts that name out in front of so many people who probably never heard it before.
The only hardcore punk band to, I think, ever be nominated. I can't think of another hardcore punk band. Not the Dead Kennedys, not the Descendants, not Black Flag. Like, none of those guys have even been considered. So the fact that the Bad Brains got nominated even, it sends a good message that at least they're an important band. It could just be a cultural thing. A bunch of black guys came to revolutionize hardcore and mix reggae and punk rock into this fusion that was a little revolution in Washington, D.C. So even if it's just for that reason, it is a good one.
It speaks to the importance of the band.
Yeah, and as they said, the Bad Brains are in the Smithsonian, which is great. But, I think the only punk bands, Ramones, Clash, the Sex Pistols denied their inauguration.
And another thing I thought was interesting is when we were talking about the free music. And he was saying the way that he was talking about freedom was very different than I think the way a lot of people perceive the word freedom.
Right.
And kind of when you're taking in this music for free, you're also supposed to be giving something back from your own time, from your own energy, because this was provided for you from somebody else's talent and their energy. No, it's up to you to repay that in one form or another.
We think of free music as like, oh, here's a free thing.
A financial thing.
Yeah, here's a free financial thing. We evaded, the credit card companies by getting this, in a sketchy website in Russian. But then HR had a completely different idea of what freedom and free music is. And it's like, that actually was one of the answers that really blew me away. And I was like, whoa, like, this guy really has a different thought process than anyone who was in the room at the time.
Yeah, it makes you kind of want to go back and look at quotes from him and reevaluate what he's saying, trying to take a different angle from it, or just look at all these different ways that a word can be subject to interpretation.
So hopefully listening to this podcast, you got a different understanding of Mr. HR from the Bad Brains. Thank you all so much for listening to this edition of the Loudwire podcast. Make sure you go to loudwire.com for all your daily rock and metal news. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter at GrahamWire.
You can follow me on Twitter at Ice Nerve Shatter. I need to up my posts, man. I'm not too busy on Twitter.
You're not getting many followers?
Because I'm not really posting.
Well, that'll happen.
Yeah, I need to post more. I trust you. I'm a good follow. I don't clog up your newsfeed.
No, you're not. You just admitted you're not a good follow.
No, I don't clog up the newsfeed, man. It's only the most essential, vital thing.
What's the last thing you posted?
Might have been the Rex Brown podcast. If that's still my last post by the time this goes up, then yeah, maybe don't.
Yeah.
Nah, you still should.
Joe's
Who knows
going.
when I'm going to come back.
Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time. Have a good one.
Play do good. Right now.